This is Hunter Muse.
And this is Chris Snipes, and you are listening
to The Melt.
Okay. What was the thing that, or experiences that led you to write this book, to compile all of this together and want to talk about it?
Well, gosh. Okay, I got very early on in the habit of, after I would have a mushroom journey, because there was, my first year was, my God, 13 years ago now. Before that, I did nothing. Like, I don't drink, I don't do recreational anything, whatever, no pharmaceuticals. But anyway, so I was experiencing these mushroom journeys once a month, and I started writing about the experience because they were really powerful experiences. And I'm a natural writer anyway. And then what happened was, after a few months, I turned that into a book. And so I wrote a book called Love and Spirit Medicine, and it chronicles my first year of what became monthly. I had 12 months in a row of these journeys. I was just called every month. And looking back, it was a kind of training for me. And I didn't have a shaman to guide me. Now there's like one on every street corner, you know, all these, but back then there was not. But I'd had fantastic teachers for 8 years prior. And I'll just quickly say, one in particular, my main teacher was Dr. Brew Joy, who was a Johns Hopkins MD of all things, but he walked away from that to teach, and he was very Jungian, and he was an amazing, powerful, profound teacher, and he opened me up to the psyche, and I read everything I could find from Jung and Marie-Louise von Franz and Ender. So that opened up a whole new world for me. And it was such excellent preparation for my later years working with the mushroom, because it helped me a lot in terms of, getting to, ego enhancement or enlargement and shadow and all of that. I was like, okay. Which was also why writing about the journeys was so helpful for me, because I could get into kind of the nitty-gritty of what happened, go into the symbolic nature, because the psyche speaks symbolically, as does nature. And so after probably 3 years or so, I would run in the woods. And because those first probably half year of mushroom journeys took place outside, and a number of them beyond that, I was in this just deep communion with the nature spirits, if you will. Just sort of happened. And I went for a run, and I could really, I would go in the Redmond watershed. I was in Redmond, Washington, just outside of Seattle. And I was really feeling the trees. And then this poetry came through. And I'm running, I'm like, I gotta remember this. And then I get home and the rest just poured out. And then it began happening on the mushroom journeys. And very early on, I was bringing through these different nature spirits, and first in just sound and then speaking. But at some point, the poetry came. And then it would happen where I would do a mushroom journey, and the entire journey was spoken in poetry. Wow. And they were speaking through.
That's amazing.
And so then what I would do is, I always had a digital recorder. I just hit record. I just put next to the pillow, because I would always do it just lying down in silent darkness, like Terence McKenna suggested. And then I went to Scotland with Freddie Silva, who's he's a researcher on crop circles and sacred sites, and he does these tours, and he was doing these little boutique tours with just 6 people. And I saw it came through in my email, and I don't recall ever signing up, but there it was. And it was these photographs of the Outer Hebrides of Scotland, and every hair on my body stood on end. I don't even think I read the actual text, but I was like, I gotta go. And I had no money at the time, but I made it work. And I went out there, and we went to the Isle of Lewis is the first place. And that's where this huge circle called Callanish is located. It's absolutely extraordinary. But there are other smaller circles, and we were in one of the smaller circles. And Freddie talked about how these are like geomagnetic hotspots, and they are geometrically precise the way the stones are placed, and they're placed, of course, on lines of magnetic energy. So, I kind of walked around the circle, and then I just stood in the center just to feel the energies. Well, since I was a child, I have been and still am clairsentient, which is where you feel things, and also claircognizant, where you know things, and it's just how I have been. And so really sensitive to energies, and also lived in a haunted house, and I've had a lot of experiences with ghosts. But anyway, I felt this tall male being next to me, and then he put his hand out, and he had this golden orb in his hand. And I knew, I was like, this is Scotland. These are my people. I'm Irish, Scottish, French. I'm a Gael. And so I reached out, and I put that in my heart center. And as soon as I did, I felt like I had a device in there. And after that, poetry was pouring through at all these different sites. And thank God I had my digital recorder. And it was incredible. And then on the plane ride home, I channeled poetry for 7 hours, just like writing. And then when I got home, I felt like, I think they came home with me. And for the next just over 3 months, I would receive these downloads in perfect rhyme. And it wasn't like, what rhymes with? No, it's just how they speak. And so I realized, and that was a number of years ago. I was like, I'm going to make this into a book. I want to put this out there, because I would because I would read it to people I knew, and they'd be like, oh my God, Shonagh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And so I did this little self-published book. So that was a while ago. And then since then, so much more has come through. I don't do that. First year I did every single month for a year. But what happened was then I started doing retreats. And I'm in my 10th year of doing one-on-one retreats, where someone comes into my home and stays. They arrive on a Sunday, and then we have 4 full days, and they leave Friday morning. And it's very deep, intimate work. I don't like crowds. I'm not a big fan of groups, but I love the intimacy of the one-on-one or the one-on-two. I love that. And so it's been just such gratifying, beautiful work with people, where they can really go into expanded states and lots of delving and all that we do. And so, anyway, oh gosh, I just lost my train of thought. In any case, so the poetry. Oh, right. So I became friends with Steve and Chris Crimmy, my publishers, and they took over the publishing of Love and Spirit Medicine, which chronicles my first year of monthly mushroom journeys and the demise of my marriage. And then they published Eshell Wisdom, which was prior to that. And that's a sweet book. It's like a love letter to women. Anyway, and then we were talking about Poetic Whispers. And Steve, I think it was Steve who said, you've got all these years since of like more, why don't you make it into a larger book? And so I thought, okay, I'll add some chapters then. And this is a very long-winded answer, of course, to your question. But in any case, so I did that. But I have to tell you guys, let's see. I worked on that. Well, actually, he told me this back in 2023. He's like, why don't you do that? And I was like, okay. And I did nothing, because when I'm writing, I have to feel it. Otherwise, it's like either the muse possesses me or she doesn't. And what happened was then after Thanksgiving, of last year, 2023, it just hit me like, we're writing this book. And so then I assembled all the poetry and then I wrote the chapters. But what I realized is, okay, in mid 2020 during the COVID cray, I took myself off all social media. I was on Facebook and a little bit on Instagram. And I just realized people are absolutely insane. And I just had my Facebook page blew up because God forbid I put an article talking about like how it's the greatest, hype nonsense of this century. Yes. And no one liked that. So I was just like, I'm bowing out. I'm busy. I've got clients coming every week. My work is word of mouth. And I don't need to get out there and toot my horn. Yeah. And it's actually dangerous to do so. Sure. So I took myself off everything. So I've been basically underground or dark or whatever for 4 years. But with this book, I realized, oh, shit, I have to go back on social media. Because if I want to sell this book, like I have to put it out there. It's not enough to, so I got back on Facebook and Instagram and whatever. And I went through like a real panic phase in January, February of this year around like, kind of going back out there. And it's surreal to sort of re-enter even that social media milieu, which I'm not a fan of. Yeah.
Well, you bring up a very interesting point, many interesting points, by naming clairsentience and claircognizance. I think that this is an aspect of humans, not just women, but humans, that is not really talked about very often. And in that whole debacle, I think those were the people who were affected the most, were the clairsentience and the claircognizance, because I speak as someone who maybe didn't have those words, but I knew what that meant. Like I have those abilities. It really fucked with me. Like it shut me down because I couldn't be out in public and be in the energy of people who were that frightened. Because as an empath, I absorb energy so much that it became like an assault to go out to the grocery store without a mask on and then be confronted by other customers, not even employees, but other customers who were trying to police my behavior. And at one point, I was in one store and I said to this woman, "You have no idea who I am. You have no idea what I've been through. You have no idea if I've been raped before. You have no idea if I've been suffocated before. You have no idea what the relationship with me covering my mouth is. So before you go around and judge people, maybe you should take a step back and think, I don't know this person's situation and why they are behaving the way that they are." And I think that weaponization of freedom is something that people like you and I are still recovering from.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm very much a hermit and I like to be with my books, do my research, do some writing. I love to learn and study anyway. And this is the thing. So interesting. My daughter moved in with me for 6 months. She's 26 and she was in Nashville and she was thinking of changing jobs and whatnot. And we're very close. I have 2 daughters and we're just like this. And she moved out last weekend and I was away in Chicago, thank God, visiting family. But before that, I was getting depressed. And I'm like, okay, wait a minute, Shonagh, whoa. Like your 26-year-old daughter, of course, she's, found a great place to live. And I'm so happy for her. But I was like, I need a social life. Like I need to leave my house and meet people. I've lived in Northern Virginia now. I moved here 2 years ago. And I know like hardly anyone other than my neighbors, because my work is so contained. Yeah. And I realized, but life is saying, daughter, no, enough of that.
Yeah.
Coming out. And then, to sort of take that risk of sort of rebooting what I do, but also doing it maybe differently. But it's harder because of these past 4. It was quite traumatizing. I have my own stories. We can talk about that at a later date. But Yeah, it's for those who are particularly sensitive and also who can see. I had a shaman teacher tell me many years ago, she said, "You are a black-eyed seer. You see the shit."
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, "Yeah, I do." And my medicine, quote unquote, in terms of spirit is the white owl. An owl sees in the dark, and it sees
Mhm.
what others can't see, and it sees what others won't see. And so
Absolutely.
it's like that saying, don't shoot the messenger, because it can
Yes.
see things people don't want to hear. And for as mystically uh inclined as I am, I also am, I love the intellect, and I've studied mind control, I've studied propaganda
Mm-hmm.
and all of that, and it was very easily recognizable. But if you don't have the formula, if you don't have that understanding, which is all by design,
Mm-hmm.
then you're going to fall for it. So it's really, I had to really work on having compassion for people as well.
Totally.
For sure.
Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. That kind of
Totally. So, would you opine that clairsentience and claircognizance potentially comes from early childhood trauma or generational trauma? Do you think that it is a skill, like a survival skill, that it's a muscle that we basically learn to exercise to survive as children or as infants even?
That's such an interesting question. So I think we're all born with it, but like any of those kind of deeper senses, trauma can certainly bring it out, because you have to develop it. If maybe the house is unsafe, and as a child, you've got to kind of feel it out. For instance, I thank God I didn't have an unsafe house, but my father was a drinker, and
Mhm.
my parents would fight, and so as a young person, I would come into the house and I would always kind of feel the vibe.
Yes.
So it's like training. And then I lived in a haunted house for 3 years, 8th, 9th, and 10th grade. And I would, believe me, feel that, because you could feel. But then I had a sister and 2 brothers who were completely oblivious
Hmm.
to it. And then when we finally moved, I remember walking through, feeling that house. And I was like, okay, it's clean.
Mhm.
So it's that kind of, it's like a bizarre kind of training where you have to access, you've got to pull that up, because whatever, of the discomfort or out of pure survival or whatever it is.
Mhm.
And think of how centuries ago we had those faculties. I think they were far easier to access,
Mhm.
by necessity. Just even sensing the surroundings, or a forest. Forests were dangerous back then, or,
Mhm.
whatever.
How did your parents handle that? So, in my situation, when I was maybe 2 years old, you said a couple of things in this interview that really resonated with me, because they were experiences that I had as a child. One was that I was able to channel my grandmother, who was a bruja from Venezuela, and speak in her language to my father as a child. So we were in Venezuela, and my father was laying on the floor, and he had his head kind of in my lap, and I was stroking his head, and I said in her voice, "O mal, mi amor," which is what she called him. And he, just streaming tears, cried, because he comes from from a space where they understand brujeria, and they understand generational, handing the torch over to the next generation.
Mm.
There was another period in my life when I was around the same age, when we were going to move into a house. And as we approached the house, I said to my mother, "I don't want to live in this house. This is I didn't say spooky, because I was so young. I said pooky. This is a pooky house." And my parents listened. So when I said this house is haunted, they were like, "Nope, we're not moving in here." How did your parents handle it when you had these experiences, or you had some knowing? Were they open to that at all?
I never discussed it with them.
Mm. Wow.
So I called the claircognizance the knowing as a
Mhm.
child. my own word. I came up with confirmations. It was the strongest word I could think of as a child. I mean, we were like Irish Catholics, so like there was no discussing that in my family anyway. And but I remember knowing when we were going to be moving from Toronto, Canada to the States, like it came to me like we're going to be moving. There was no indication. And I remember like it was yesterday standing with my younger sister. My dad was sitting on the chair, so he was sort of the same height as us, and telling us. And I remember thinking, no one will believe me that I knew this. And so that's just how I felt. And it actually, my mother and I never discussed the ghost. I didn't know she knew. I thought it was just me until a few years later after we had moved. And then I was, and then my mom actually saw it because she's she's Irish and she's got that gift of sight. She's never really used it much, but she has that ability. And so, yeah, and then also I was as a teenager, I got very just like involved in just trying to fit in, which I didn't ever anywhere, but I tried desperately, which was cringeworthy. So I got kind of sucked into just the life stuff, right? As you're a kid and whatever. But I just always had that. And I would always still, of course, know if like, especially bad things were going to happen. Damn it, I would know. And then I would get the news or whatever. And it happens even with stuff in the mail. And it's just wild. I mean, it really makes you wonder, like, what exactly are we in? I mean, it's definitely electric, magnetic.
Yeah, I think that's why the EMF situation is such a cage that we are being put in energetically. I think that the real prison is that those EMF frequencies that are maybe interrupting or interfering with this natural knowing that you're talking about. But what's so powerful about it is that it still happens for some people. Like even with all the EMFs, you still have this ability.
Maybe it's just far fewer people than would have been the case many centuries ago. But you were saying in the past people were able to access that stuff more easily, and maybe it's because of what you're saying. There's just wasn't as much noise, electrical noise.
Absolutely, they've run interference.
Yeah,
and certainly with the Wi-Fi, it's affecting migrating birds and honeybees. And us, and those are pulsations which we can't see. It's very harmful to our electromagnetic field.
Totally.
So what you mentioned having a series of mushroom experiences monthly for a year. What first put mushrooms on your radar? How did you know to do that?
Well, in my 40s, I was just a voracious student of the mystery. And so I started first working with Brew, and I was with him for 3 years. And then he went away for a while, and then he passed away. And then I worked with a few other teachers, including a wonderful mushroom teacher in the Yucatan, Miguel Angel Vergara. And I was really into that exploration of the Mayan mysteries. And he was such a good, I had really good teachers, mostly men, interestingly, but good in that, I mean, they were really in touch, and no one was trying to sort of, drop down the ladies like you hear so much of. Like, these were good men. And then I heard about ayahuasca. I was probably 47 or something. And I had a dear friend who had an ayahuasca experience. Friends of mine were hosting some guy from Bolivia who ended up getting into her sleeping bag at the end of the experienced. And I remember her telling me, but she was like, oh, it was so beautiful, it was so sensual, he was so and I was like, what, I don't know anything about ayahuasca, but I don't think that the shaman's supposed to like climb into your sleeping bag.
No, I don't think so either.
I was like, what's this guy's name again? And I look him up and I find a whole blog dedicated to this guy written by women who've been molested by him. So that was out. And but I found my way to an all women's ayahuasca ceremony. So I had 2 experiences there. I had another 2 later. But I was like, you know what? This is not my medicine. This is not feeling right for me. And I had a dear friend who, of course, has worked with that and the mushroom and whatnot. And he lived up in the Washington rainforest. And so I trusted him implicitly. I knew he wouldn't like pull any nonsense. And I just said, could you induct me into experiencing the mushroom? And he said, absolutely. So my first experience was outside at night in this mossy rainforest.
Oh, man.
It was
Lovely.
exquisite. And I had the most amazing experience. You know, I mean, it just opens people in amazing ways. Not always. And I always say also, it's not for everyone, obviously, because it's not. And there's a whole dark side to all this psychedelic stuff. Like I put myself out there as what I consider to be like an older woman's voice for the reverent use of these medicines, I call them. But I'm not kind of in the psychedelic community, if you will. I mean, I'm very much a on the edges person, and that's where I like to be. So that first experience, I had a huge healing, and then I just had to go back. And I worked with him again, but then we became involved with him. Anyways, this whole long story, but it was all meant to be, and it was all part of it. And then that year also went into a dark night of the soul. It was absolutely awful, but all of it initiatory and necessary, and shaped me profoundly. And it's changed my entire life. Like we're having this conversation today because of the mushrooms all those years ago. And so I have great respect for nature's offerings and hold that in very high regard. And at the same time, you know, I don't think of myself as any kind of expert or high master or any of that, because I mean, I'm just a pilgrim, a student in mystery for the rest of my life. So yeah.
When you were doing the recordings, were they in your voice? Is it like you were speaking spontaneously, or was there something slightly different about them?
My voice is very different. Okay, so it comes in stages. Like what first happens is these strange sounds come out, and I can't even try to do, nor would I hear, but I mean, like on my own, I can't even duplicate them. But it comes to me, it's like this is all vibration. And so, I don't know, there are land spirits. They feel very sort of feminine in nature. And then, oh my gosh, I just lost the word. Okay, so these guys come through. They're not elven, Paracelsus. There were the gnomes. They're the gnomes. And they've got these long beards. They're stroked like this, and these long, long fingers, and they're hunched over. Like they totally take me over. And when they speak through me, that is not my voice. I can understand why maybe if someone in the distant past was caught doing this or heard doing this, they would think they were channeling demons, because it's kind of scary the way the voice sounds.
I'm sure.
And it's gravelly and but they're wonderful, and they're funny, they're humorous, they're deeply wise. And then other voices come through. Yeah, and it's I can always, it's interesting because I'm not clear what is it? To be clairvoyant. I'm not clairvoyant, so I don't see, but I feel. And so I can kind of read or feel the frequency signature of what's coming. So I know, those are the owls, you know, and so yeah. And then other times my voice, I had a good friend listen, they were like, wow, like that's your voice, not these other characters who come through, but she said, that's your voice, but the whole quality is different. She's like, you just sound so different. And it's very slow and sort of metered. And, and I tell you, like, I have these experiences and I get out of that and I am so humbled and awed and just always like, oh my God, like, that was so beautiful. And I don't take it for granted. It's not like, oh yes, now I'm going to channel the grand hoo-ha of the whatever.
On demand.
No, that's not how it works. And so sometimes a poetic transmission will come through, when I'm not on the mushroom on my morning walks. I got 3 days in a row a couple of years ago here. And, but I can't make it. I can't force it.
Mhm.
It just comes. And what they've explained also is often it's sort of, it's timing wise. And they sort of, it's like, I don't know, electrical signals that kind of travel through. And sometimes it's easier to come, and sometimes, it's just not appropriate. I don't know, I'm not really making sense here, but the mushroom definitely activates something when
Mhm.
I take it. It opens a door.
Mhm.
But the door's been open, and so beyond that, it is possible to come through. But I will tell you, I have this sort of battle in me between my intellect and then that mystical part. There's a part of me that feels very uncomfortable with it,
Hmm.
and another part that says, no, I accept this. It's just, this is a greater mystery than what we realized, obviously, because we can see that. And also, and I've been in deep study of these Renaissance philosophers and medieval astrology, and I'm so blown away at that depth of knowledge, which I think is starting to come back to certain people, that understanding of the inner workings of nature and of the celestial, planetary influences, and just, it's just all so beautiful to me. And the spirits of nature. I mean, they were just so connected in such profound ways back then, even though it was very dangerous, because during the Renaissance you had the church, and that was a looming threat to a number of people who were writing at that time. But anyway, yeah, so I have this internal battle in me of sort of, I don't know, I'm not an intellectual, but I would just call it the intellectual and the mystic.
Yeah. Sure. Rational and completely
Yes.
irrational. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Did you?
So we are in the midst right now of very tumultuous times, as you know,
Oh, yeah.
obviously, worldwide.
Mhm.
Some people say that it is a spiritual battle. Some people say that it's a psychic battle. And there's definitely a physical war that is being waged right now on humanity. I am so curious about the timing of what is happening right now in our world. We recently interviewed Dr. Aman Hillman, who is a philologist.
Mhm.
He studies ancient Greek, and he is one of 4 people on this planet who can translate this particular type of Greek. In our discussion with him, he was talking about mysteries and women and oracles, and how mysteries in the ancient world were actually rites, chemical rites that were done, and that women were behind most of these rites, that they were the magicians of the time. What I'm curious about is, it seems that there is a renaissance that's happening right now of ancient knowledge that you are connected with, knowledge that Dr. Hillman is connected with. Would you posit or opine that this awakening of this ancient knowledge is an armament in this spiritual war, that maybe that the earth, that our mother is now maybe waking up these mystics, and that one of the ways that we are going to engage in this battle is by using these old methods? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, we are in a dualistic universe, and so the prevailing, I don't know, energy, if you will, it's almost like, okay, so the way I look at it is like, okay, so evil has center stage right now,
Mhm.
and nature's cyclical, and we're in a down cycle. I say we're
Mhm.
in a circling the toilet cycle right now. All right. And so that pendulum, which is always swinging, is swung very far, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. And also, so I see this also as a battle between the synthetic and the organic.
Yes.
And it's an overlay, and we have very, very powerful forces, people who've been in power for a very long time. This didn't just show up 100 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, very, very old.
Mm-hmm.
And they're long-term planners. Every queen, king has had their court astrologer and magician. I mean, you'd be a damn fool if you didn't.
Yeah.
And that
Right.
has not changed.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we're in a time that's been prophesied, and things are looking very grim indeed. And then, of course, they're genociding the West.
Mm-hmm.
They are weaponizing people from other countries. They
Mm-hmm.
migrants, whatever they, and so they're totally weaponized. I mean, it's just, the whole thing's falling in front of us. And, even Brew, my teacher, used to say the deep psyche demands balance.
Mm.
Like you'll go one way, but it'll create something that brings some level of balance, if at all possible. And I think that's how nature works as well. And I see there is, so in the midst of all, like, I was calling this a shitstorm, because it is, there is this renaissance. And it's not just this ancient knowledge. It's just on many levels. Like, I see it also. I'm way into farming and real traditional food and all of this. And we saw that during COVID, more people kind of turning to the land, the homesteading piece. I remember saying, gosh, no one's laughing at the preppers anymore. Isn't that interesting? Now they all want to take courses from them.
Exactly.
So I think this is really, we're in, it's insanity. And in fact, I'll quickly read you something if I can quickly find it. I was reading this beautiful book called The Declaration on the Dignity of Man by Giovanni Pico della Mirandola. And he was Marsilio Ficino's student in the 1400s.
Mm.
And oh gosh, I hope I might not be able to find it, you guys. Let me just see. I take notes on this stuff, and there was a piece in the introduction to that book that was so amazing. Anyway, it was talking about, I'll just paraphrase it. It was talking about this 20th century and how we have got sort of man as king, mankind as sort of the king. And then we've got the thing, which is kind of the things that man invents and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is, if the thing takes over in place of sort of mankind and nature, then man becomes unkinged, if you will. We lose our nobility, and we become possessed by like a demonic possession. They used a word, and I can't remember the word now. I looked it up in Webster's 1828. I've never seen that word, and it means demonic possession. So that it's all about the thing, and like, here we are. It's all about, it's all technology.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And even the television, think of the television before any of this, the computer stuff came around. The television became the family altar.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so now, everyone is, just looking into their black mirror.
Mm-hmm.
It's all sorcery, ultimately.
Totally.
And that's what I think of these folks who are running the show as high sorcerers. And even Mr. Soros, his name is, whether you turn it forwards or backwards, spells Soros. So that's interesting. So I don't know, life is tenacious. They're all about death and destruction and control. But life is tenacious. And I know that people have been dumbed down beyond recognition. And that makes it things very difficult. Because I think also astrologically, people are saying, we're in a similar lineup to, this country, when the Declaration of Independence and all of that was happening. And I was like, well, we're in trouble, because back then people read, they were very intelligent and very well read. And we don't have that depth of understanding today. And I just think of that line from the Bible, my people perish for lack of knowledge. Not because they're not eating right. They don't have that knowledge. So
the formal debates back in Lincoln's time lasted 7 hours.
I know people said to me, did you watch the presidential debate? I was like, I'm not going to insult my good mind with that shite. Are you kidding me?
Can you imagine 3 hours, being given 3 hours to give your point, and then your opponent given 3 hours to respond, and then another hour for an audience to ask questions?
What do you think that would do to the ratings, dear? No one would watch. No one would watch. Like, this is...
because people were coming from hundreds of miles away, would walk to go to these debates because it meant so much. It was so important.
Right. And they had the attention span and just the intellectual capacity to take it in and think critically. And so I don't know. If this were a novel, it's a nail biter. It's a nail biter. And again, these are forces. And I felt the force of the Mother Earth on my very first mushroom journey. I didn't know what to expect, but I wasn't expecting her to speak to me the way she did. And so also, look, I think, naturally, I mean, we are of this earth. We're of the stars, we're of this earth. And all of this propaganda, this conditioning, programming feels very much to me like Pied Piper leading Earth's children into the mountain, never to be seen again. And so this is a time. And I think a number of people are standing up. Certainly, you can see people standing up in other countries too, just to kind of stand up for the dignity of their own people, even though they're called names because of it. But in any case, I don't know, you guys, like, I waver back and forth, but here's the deal. For myself, it's not like I know what's going on. I see, but I don't ever watch the news because it's all propaganda. I don't own a television. No, I don't watch Netflix. It's all programming. And so for myself, I realize also they call this a temple. The mind is a temple. And the left brain masculine has to be like the guardian of the right brain, feminine, who can't really tell the difference if you go to a movie between real and not. She's impressionable because and that's why they do all hide words and this and so it slips past the conscious mind and embeds in the deep psyche and informs the deep psyche, which can be very treacherous. And so I've been really trying to sort of fill my mind, like treat it as a temple. And especially in reading these older texts by these deeply philosophical, deep thinkers, it's actually helping. And I was thinking, I'm going to put together just like a one-night event called Navigating the Crazy, like to kind of help people. And the first thing is going to be just giving them some tips on recognizing propaganda and where to read more about it. And then also about what to kind of bring into your mind, because this stuff it's not that difficult to understand. It's absolutely beautiful. The words, and this is what we need. And Chris Crimmy, one of my publisher, I love how she says, beauty is not a necessity. No. Beauty is not a luxury. It's a necessity. And the world is getting uglier by the day because communism is damn ugly. It's ugly. If you had a look at communist architecture, it just makes it's soul draining. It sinks your heart. Yeah, everything's good. So I feel like part of the way to sort of stand up to this and fight this, is to cultivate our mind and heart with this beautiful technology of words, of philosophy. And also I study law. I've studied law for a long time, like 10, 11 years now. And I've been deep in the study of equity law for the past 2.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another thing we need desperately, because people don't know their own law, so they don't know how to stand up. And I mean, they're coming after everything. They're coming for everything.
You're the first person who ever defined law properly. I've never heard someone say land, air, and water, ever.
Oh, yeah. Well,
like so
yeah.
That just shows you how willfully or unfortunately ignorant people are of the language that we're using.
Yes, they've been made ignorant.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, have you guys listened to John Taylor Gatto ever? You would
No,
love
I know.
him.
I've heard of him, but I've never heard any of them.
He passed away a few years back, but he taught in the public school system for 40 years. But he was educated in the very best way and read many, many, many books, and also didn't teach the children the way he was supposed to at all.
Mm-hmm.
He really fought against that. And so he gave many, many, many lectures and wrote a couple of fantastic books on that dark side of like what education really is. And it's not what we think it is. It's all about programming and indoctrination. So I think when I work, so I do counseling with clients. I do online counseling sessions, and then I do these retreats.
Mm-hmm.
And I always, always want to go to what I call the origination point of the issue or the wounding or whatever it is. Because when I'm listening, I catch the patterns right away. Like they're telling me the story, and I'm like, this is no different than someone at the doctor's office telling them the symptoms of something, that originated, before that. So, people need to understand kind of what this education thing is. And like, in other words, how did we get here? We have to reverse engineer this back. And it goes back to the whole Prussian education system. And that removed the whole apprenticeship relationship between the master and the apprentice. And then that person learned every single facet of that. And also children, Massachusetts back in when Horace Mann was around, so whatever, mid 1848, something like that. The readership was at like 98% in Massachusetts. Like many states, the majority of people could read. They didn't want that. And the factory owners didn't want that. They didn't want educated populace that would make trouble for them and that could think critically. So that, there's a whole history there. And then the law piece, I had a mentor for a couple of years who just educated me in such an amazing way. And he was all about the maxims of law, which I love. But I remember I said, denigrated the Bible, Irish Catholic, I said something, whatever. And he's like, Shonagh, you better get over that about how you feel about the Bible, because guess what? Law is ecclesiastical in nature, and all those maxims that you like so much originate out of the Bible. There's a lot of wisdom there. And so you don't have to agree with all of it, but there's a lot of wisdom. And of course, he's absolutely correct. Yeah. So people knew that too. They knew law just from their study of the Bible. So it was harder to schnooker them. And now, because of how people are taught, and the trivium and the quadrivium, that's a true classical education, that was, oh boy, they got that out of there. That teaches you how to learn. So, we have to, I'm like, it looks like we're in like a worldwide initiation, if you will. And initiations are rough, and they really can kill you, so many of them, right? So we have to call back our power. I mean, I've been saying for years, this is grow up time.
Oh, yeah.
So again, it's like, yes, I channel a group of she, the Irish word for fairy, and I can go into these deep mystical states. It's not woo-woo. They don't talk woo-woo nonsense at all. They're not little Tinkerbells. They're tall, they're shimmering, beautiful beings, and they don't screw around. And so I have that connection, but then I also so value this grounded, just the intellect and the reason and logic and just, it's so important because most people don't have it. And then even with the presidential race, oh yeah, anyone but Trump. And, but then, people on the other side were like, anyone but Hillary back in 2016. Like, but what about just their background? Why don't we just examine who the hell is this person? Yeah. What's really going on here? Never mind the fact that it's not a real government anyway, it's a corporation.
Yes.
Totally.
28 USC paragraph 11A. United States is a federal corporation. It's right there. If anyone would look.
I do notice that I love that you, just one of the many, I feel like we're starting I have a huge crush on you, is what I'm trying to say. But one of the reasons...
I can leave the room.
One of the reasons, it's like a psychic, energetic, like you're a warrior woman. It's like you're the kind of woman that I look for on this earth. So when I find someone like this, I'm like, yes, thank God, there's another person. What I love about you is that you are not just focused on the Fae. Your energy is not just focused on mysticism, that you fold in natural law, you fold in education, you fold in sovereignty into all of these, into a cacophony of brilliance. Our children both went to Waldorf schools and graduated from Waldorf schools. And it was all because of Chris and his former partner. They really went out of their way to find a great education for their children, and I consider them my sons as well. So they've learned to critically think, and they are now going into high school, or our youngest is going into high school, and our eldest is excelling in high school and into a public school situation. So
kind of bored.
And bored because that education translated to being able to navigate the traditional programming school system very easily. It's a walk in the park for him. So what I would posit is that this education piece, this law piece, along with the Fae, that these energies are basically helping this paradigm shift happen. So you'll see people, like people who work in Silicon Valley, none of their kids are allowed to have cell phones because they know the damage of these phones. So like all Apple executives, their kids don't have phones. Bill Gates, none of his kids are vaccinated. There's a lot of people in Hollywood who send their children to Waldorf schools. So there's almost like two different realities that are existing simultaneously. There is this dark satanic art energy that's happening, and then there's this other energy that I think is trying to be suppressed or shut down, but it's so powerful and it resonates at such a high level that it's what you're saying, like life wants to live, nature wants to be. So I think that that's why the ramping up has happened, because there are so many people who are saying, you know what, this consensus reality thing, this going to school and getting a miserable job, none of this shit is working. So it does feel like there is some, I don't want to say hope because it's not a matter of hope, but it does feel like there is some change that's happening right now.
Yes. And for all their plans for their whatever, World Economic Forum 2030, we'll eat crickets and own nothing and be happy and all this nonsense. I just keep thinking of that saying, the best laid plans of mice and men, right? I mean, something always goes not the way you planned it. And so yeah. We need knowledge. We need to really ramp back up on those of us whose minds are still functioning. I think it's really important to inform ourselves. I mean, I've helped people with my equity law knowledge and helped someone who received a summons, and it's all done honorably. It's not warfare in any way. It's nothing I can really talk about too much on YouTube because this isn't talked about on YouTube. And if it is, that's not the person you want to listen to. Like the real people who, who have the integrity. Like my teacher has said, if I see any of these or hear of any of these videos being passed around or put on YouTube, I'll stop teaching.
Mm.
So, and I just found my way to him through, just prayer and asking. So, but that's out there. And he really feels, my teacher said, this is, the world's going to change. Like it's coming, this better world, as more and more people, again, give themselves this knowledge, because, equity, you can go and do, you sort of accept whatever their presentment is that they give to you, whether it's from the big tax guys or whoever it is, there's a way to do that. And you just eliminate the controversy through just accepting. I mean, there's an awful lot to it, but it works. It's the only thing I've seen that does.
Have you gone so far as to change your status, or what way are you approaching the problem?
This has nothing to do with status. You don't have to change your status to do equity. And equity it's in the Constitution, Article 3, Section 2, Clause 1 in the first sentence. But in terms of status, I was born in Canada. So I got way deep into that. And I joined the Anna von Reitz, who I think she's she is a wealth of knowledge. My God. And but the problem is, for me anyway, it's real dicey because I'm here as a permanent resident. I mean, I've been here most of my life. I never did become a citizen. But what I do see, though, is I'm like, God, these Americans are so lucky because you guys can change your status. And there's a way to do it through the passport also that is very highly effective. But again, my teacher says with equity, but this is with everything, you have to know how to stand on your square, because yes, you will be challenged. Yes, you will be tested. And paperwork isn't enough. You've got to know this. You've got to
embody
really
it.
Live this. Yeah. Yeah. So, and the problem is, of course, all these people have been very poorly educated, which is an understatement, and programmed, indoctrinated, so that you have the common people policing themselves.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just brought up such a salient point in saying that. I just saw a video of a woman who was going through an international airport, and she had a mask on, and when she got to go through customs, the gentleman said, oh, you have to take your mask off so we can take a photo. And she said, I don't want to be part of the biometric. I don't want my photo taken. No. And he goes, well, you have to. Lied and said you have to. And she said, I travel all the time. I know that I don't have to do that. And there's a sign right next to, like, he's standing at this thing right at his booth. There was a sign that said, you can opt out. But what I recognized in that, Shonagh, is that here's a man who's probably making $12 to $15 an hour to sit at this desk. He has one tiny, tiny, tiny little grain of power on this planet. And it is to stop every single person that comes through his booth and make them take this photo, even though he doesn't have the right to do that. So I think that's the mesmerism, is you take powerless people and you give them a tiny bit of power, and then they're going to exercise that as much as they possibly can because they feel so powerless in every other aspect of their lives.
Well, they're also wearing a costume.
Totally.
And so we have all, again, been programmed to obey authority.
Yes.
And then even with all the medical tyranny, we were always shown the doctor with the stethoscope around their neck. Like, what doctor walks around with a stethoscope around their neck? But anyway, that's
a heart doctor only.
yeah. So it's all, the
Theater.
associations that we've, made. And of course, it's all in all that, TV shows and all that programming as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so most people comply, they unquestioning compliance. But that's also the behaviorism and everything that within the Taylorism for the compulsory schooling.
Totally.
Was all psychological programming, and of course continues today. So, it's really interesting because I think COVID woke a lot of people up.
Mm-hmm.
And I did notice there were an awful lot of people studying natural law and, oh boy.
Totally.
And, I think that's continuing. So I don't know. It's a slippery slope. We've got people who are very, very indoctrinated and very, very ingrained and very, very angry, like ready to just erupt. And this constant pablum of media just feeding them and the algorithms. I don't know. We've got a mess on our hands. And it's like being a mom and trying to keep your child away from all of the influences, which are just ubiquitous. But there's a line from one of the poetic transmissions that came through me that said, with regard to sort of, wanting to kind of, I don't know, help shift in some way what's going on. Contributed, said, one by one becomes most all. And I love that. So it's almost like, look, just don't worry about, where all the other people,
exactly.
You take whatever God-given gifts you have, cultivate those and make the world, or your little backyard a better place. And I remember, I've been saying this for 20 years, saying that someone needs to be when the shit hits the fan, someone needs to be the acupuncture needle of groundedness and clarity when people are confused and scared and lost. And I was, during COVID, I was living in Vermont. I was on Isle La Motte, so I was all away from the cray by the Canadian border on an actual island on Lake Champlain. But what I would do is I would drive into Burlington to the organic grocery store that opened at 7 a.m. and I'd get there at 5 to 7. So there was like no one there and I'd do my shopping. But one time I went there a little later and I had no mask. And people are just so passive. It's amazing. But some older man, like in his 70s or whatever, walked in, a really, really horrible person, and yelled at the top of his lungs, well, what do we have here? And I'm pushing my cart, and then I realized, I think he's talking about me. And then he came up and he was so verbally abusive. He was disgusting. And he said, I should beat the shit out of you. Like, it was scary. No one talks to me like that. But, the entire time, I just kept my gaze on the floor because I knew instinctively this man is a ticking time bomb and he wants me to react.
Totally.
First of all, I've seen enough of those disgusting videos of people having fights like jackals for whatever. I don't care who was right. That's not how you do it. And I just thought, no. Like, I just prayed, but it was like, I'm going to be that acupuncture needle of calm and just let him do his thing. And then at some point I found a couple of, guys who worked there. By then I was pretty much sobbing and shaking like a leaf, but whatever, they took care of it. But I didn't want to call the cops. I was just, whatever, let me just get out of here in one piece. But that's hard for a lot of people to do right now because they're so amped up and they've been so, programmed a certain way. And I just think, look, we have to be as grounded as we possibly can right now because all of this is artificial. Like, all of this change and everything that's going on, we know this was all by design. And all of these events are staged, and we're watching a bunch of actors, and I don't believe one word, and I don't trust either side.
Yeah.
No way.
Either side. Come on. It's two wings of the same bird, for God's sake. And it's the oldest trick in the book, divide and rule.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And now, we see beautiful Ireland in the UK. I mean, my heart is breaking for what's happening there. So they've got, the native British, native Irish, and then they've got, these mostly Islamic fighting age men, and destroying the country. But ultimately, they've been weaponized. They're being used.
Totally.
So they want these two sides fighting.
Mm-hmm.
But no one is, saying, wait a minute, well, people are, but it's kind of like, why don't we all take a look at who created this in the first place and who wrecked your country of Syria or, North Africa or wherever the hell they came from? We're all being played.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And made to hate each other, and the left and the right and all this nonsense. Oh my God. Woof.
It's so ridiculous. So it's like telling a fish that the water it's swimming in is fake. I mean, that's a bad metaphor, but we've been so steeped in this quote unquote reality that, it just takes a couple of generations for people to forget the really vital things that were of utmost importance to past generations. So you erase that kind of stuff. You erase humans' connection with the greater context of nature. And it can get quite dangerous, and steep them in media where they don't even really have to have any experiential, actual exchange with the outside world. You can steer them in any fucking direction you want to.
Yes, and also he who believes in nothing will fall for anything, as the saying goes. And so you remove God from the equation altogether. So no spiritual anything. All
Yes.
these kind of, I don't know, these psychedelic people I hit, just people who are like, oh, there's a lot of kind of Marxists in that. I'm like, dude, if they really just lay it down, you're not going to be allowed to do your Burning Man and all that stuff. No way. Are you kidding me? You guys
Well, it'll happen, but it will be the elite that are allowed to go, and
Sponsored by Monsanto.
and there will be people, the slaves, who will put it all together. So those things will still exist for the wealthy, but for the common man, those things will disappear.
Yes.
But I do find it very interesting that there is this sudden, within the past 10 years, really that it's ramped up, this idea that psychedelics are the movement that we really need to be propping up, and we really need to get, psilocybin stores on every corner, and we need to get people on these drugs. But they're potentially the synthesized version of these drugs, or they are Monsanto'd versions of these drugs, or GMO'd versions of these drugs. So again, anytime there's some kind of vast movement that looks like it's in the alternative space, the first thing I do is I hit the brake and I sit back and I say, okay, what's the agenda here? Why do we suddenly want everyone on psilocybin? Why do we suddenly want everyone fucked up on cannabis? Why do we suddenly want people to be doing these ayahuasca journeys? I think that what is happening is that there's this idea that this is going to be mind expanding, and it's going to culturally help people, and it's going to somehow elevate humanity. But maybe if it's placed in the wrong people's hands, it's going to have an antithetical effect.
Well, and also when I think of even the ancients who were using different substances to take them into these high trance states, they were highly trained.
Mm-hmm.
And the other piece too, I was researching what I could find of the women druids and the seeresses, and they were highly learned people, the men and women. And that's when also I realized, oh my God, they were studied in law, highly learned in law.
Mhm.
And so there's Roman accounts of the Druids. So you read those accounts, and there was one story of a Druid woman being brought to judge on a major matter, and the Romans were like, "What? Really?" And then the Delphic priestesses, they had two massive columns in the forecourt of the entrance to that temple, and they were inscribed with 147 maxims that were given by the 7 sages of the day. And every priestess in that temple, I promise you, knew her maxims, and they were highly learned. And I realized too, again, we don't have that. We have people who are indoctrinated and programmed taking these substances.
Mhm.
And they don't necessarily free the mind. Like I remember early on going to some conferences, and I spoke at some conferences maybe 10 or 11 years ago, psychedelic conferences. But talking to people and like scratching my head thinking, are we talking about the same thing?
Yeah.
Because this person is just like, they just sound like just another totally indoctrinated kind of person. I'm like thinking, what? I thought I was supposed to open the mind. And then I got a big fat lecture from someone in the psychedelic realm who's kind of a elder leader, whatever, a big lecture for talking about law, and she was just like, nope, that's nonsense. And, we work with attorneys and blah, blah, blah. And what you're saying is dangerous and all this stuff. I was like, you haven't been studying what I've been studying,
Yeah.
So you're ensconced in the matrix understanding.
I would encourage you to listen to our Dr. Hillman episode, because he's talking about the oracles in Delphi, and what he said from the translations is that these are 14-year-old girls that have been trained from birth, that they have been given these substances. Many of them were given 7 different types of snake venom, and another substance called the burning purple. So you see these women and they have purple on their fingers and around their faces, and these oracles would be given these substances, and then whatever download or transmission they were given, if it said you have to go and kill that senator, they would do it, because they were the law of the land.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really interesting to see historically how women have had these ancient powers and been part of these ancient rites and conducted these mysteries, and through the church historically they were basically castrated and eviscerated and taken, just tried to wipe them off of the planet. So I think it's interesting in your research how you have connected the Druidic knowledge, and you mentioned in another interview that a lot of this knowledge was suppressed and buried because of how these people were treated, that they were basically wiped out throughout Ireland and throughout Scotland, that if you were practicing any of these rites, that it would basically mean death for you.
Well, think of the witch burnings. There's a fantastic book written in 1840 by Charles Mackay called Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds. And it goes into like the tulip bubble and just all these, where people get swept up in this just insanity. And so he did a whole chapter on the witch burnings, a very long one, very detailed. And I actually could not finish it. It was so horrific. But what it really showed you was how otherwise ordinary, reasonable, functioning people will turn into psychopathic monsters out of fear. And so, yes, the church put a lot of propaganda. It wasn't just the Catholic Church as well, the Protestant Church, the Church of England, whatever, but put out that propaganda, and people believed it. And so, so all that stuff had to go underground. And I talk in the book also about the seer poets of old Ireland and their training in these houses of darkness. And oh my God, I'm so wistful. I'm so blown away They were called the File, and they were the seer poets, and they were taught for 12 years, and they had magical training as well. And but eventually, even the poetry schools, they had to go underground because of the persecution. And this was coming from Great Britain. But in any case, yeah, I mean, all of that had to go away. And then we had the Enlightenment, quote unquote, which sounds just like that word progressive. And all this sort of high rational came in. And so all of that superstitious nonsense, according to that, just went by the wayside and was poo-pooed. And so then mockery was used as well. And
do you think that that's why there's not as many female writers in the psilocybin space, like in ancient texts, because maybe those texts were burnt? Or
Hunter, there's a great book called The Woman in the Shaman's Body by Barbara Tedlock, PhD. And so you will love that book. And she's Canadian. Her grandmother was Ojibwe. And so she ended up as an anthropologist, I believe. And she and her husband went into Guatemala and Mexico. And they actually apprenticed with these traditional curanderas and curanderos and worked with the mushroom. But throughout her book, she was talking about how these anthropologists and explorers and whatnot, and they go to these different places around the world, and they would come across these shamans, and, there'd be women shamans, and they would just see them as either the assistant to the man or a witch. And so they were just ignored or, written out altogether. And even oh my gosh, what is his name? Sorry, I can't think of his name now. He wrote extensively on the shamanic people, but he also kind of poo-pooed the women. And then Barbara wrote that even as back in like 1996, not that long ago, there was a documentary being done on this shaman, and his wife was a very accomplished shaman in her own right, and they just kind of ignored her, I think, until he finally said, look, my wife is very accomplished, but they were just going to kind of, so it's just been that way for quite some time. And obviously it's shifting. Maybe 10 years ago, I was asked to speak at this psychedelic conference in Asheville, Oregon, and it was a 2-day conference, and I was the only woman speaker.
Wow.
But that's changed dramatically now, which is wonderful. Because I remember, like, I'm not a feminist. Like, I'm all for, like, you do. I think, women encouraged to do what they want to do. But that feminism thing, whatever, I think it's very dark, and it's Marxism and blah, blah, blah. But in any case, I remember saying, where are the medicine women? Like, just in that first year of Mushroom Journeys, I read every book I could find, because I'm a researcher on mushrooms, psychedelics, and they're mostly written by men. I mean, they're great books, many of them, but I was like, where are the women? So yeah, but there's a lot more now, which is wonderful, but I think we still have a ways to go.
I heard a quote years ago from a woman who was a powerful executive, and she said, you can get anything accomplished in the world that you want as long as you're willing to let someone else take the credit. And I thought, that is so fucking true for women. Like, we can be the machine as long as we will allow someone else to take the center stage. And it's the ego, I think, that stands in the way of that we want to be acknowledged too. But is that really necessary, or is the change necessary?
Yeah. Well, depends.
Maybe a little of both.
Yeah.
Well, if I may step back into the realm of natural law, I'm always curious, as you probably, if you've kind of browsed through our archives, we've talked to various people about things like this, and I'm always curious as to how it manifests in their life. So do you see part of your role in being a sovereign soul, for lack of a better term, to cut off contracts with the state, with the government? Do you not engage in that way? Is the goal to extricate yourself from the legal matrix, or are you concerned with something completely different?
Well, I want to extricate myself. So equity is the only thing I've seen that really works profoundly, and it's worked for me. We'll have a private conversation about what it's done for me.
Okay.
It works and it's recognized. So in terms of contracts, as a thing is bound, so it is unbound. And so how do you bind a contract with your signature? How do you unbind a contract with your signature? And so in equity, you do something called rescission, which is not the same thing as rescind. It's completely different, devil's in the details. And so rescission is the unmaking of a contract from the beginning, not merely a termination. And so you can do rescission for 3 different reasons. One is if there was a fraud, but in equity, we don't argue, so we're not going to argue that. The second reason, this is upheld by the Supreme Court. The second reason is if it was a ridiculous contract that no one could possibly, actually bring due, or if you made a mistake. And so we are taught how to rescission documents or even tickets. And wherever there's print, you have to write rescission from the bottom left-hand corner up to the top in all capitals. And then you sign your signature and date it. And then you send that with what's called a non-negotiable notice of rescission. And it's written very specifically. And so I've done that with a few contracts. And then also then the acceptances are really powerful because there is no lawful money, as I'm sure you know. They took gold and silver out of circulation in 1933.
Yeah.
And but they would have been hung for treason if they didn't give some kind of remedy for that. And equity is the remedy, but of course not going to tell everyone, the muggles, no way. So, but this has been deeply studied, this equity. It's not like some great idea that someone designed. All from their books, So, and we go through the Black's Law and the Levine's manuals and Burton's legal thesaurus and all of this, and we learn terminology, and then we do this a very specific way. And because ultimately everything's banking. The judge is a banker, the clerk is a banker. That courthouse, that's why I get charged with crimes. It's all money, money, money. That's all they care about.
Yeah.
And but you have to stand on your square because they're going to push back. Like if you have to go to court, which I haven't done with equity yet. And I hope not to, just because it's a pain in the ass. But this is the other thing. Most people don't want to be bothered.
Yeah.
Totally.
So there's always an attorney you can hire and pay through the nose and get them to whatever, speak for you. But attorneys are torn for the dead. I mean, the whole thing is a fictionalized system.
Exactly.
So, but I have, for me being Canadian and just realizing, the status thing is not going to really, I wasn't born here. I'm screwed. I remember being so upset about that. Like when I really understood what was possible for someone who is born here. If only Americans had this level of knowledge, then, they really could free themselves. But in any case, the equity has been an absolute godsend. And I have heard also known people who it's worked for and worked with the tax guys as well. I don't want to say what that is, that organization that we all know.
Sure.
And they actually, of all organizations, they recognize equity. And so my stories are fabulous, but I'm not going to tell them on a YouTube channel.
I love it.
Yeah. So there is hope. In other words, there is remedy. But again, we have to really be on our toes now because we're up against, these are murderous tyrants. Look what they're doing. Look what they did with COVID and more to come. This is no joke what we are up against. And at the same time, I don't know, I've never felt during COVID, I realized I've never felt so close to God or creator, whatever you want to call that. I've never felt so close to God as I do now. Because I thought, how come I can see what most people can't? It was never a question gosh, should I take that shot? No, it was never up for discussion because I could see.
Mm-hmm.
And I could recognize everything they would say, follow, trust the science. We're all in this together. I'm like, those sound like slogans.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, if it's so true, why do you have to repeat it every single solitary, like just, why is this
Yeah.
repeated over and over and over and over? That's what you do with lies. You're
Mm-hmm.
trying to, you know, ingrain them into people's minds. Truth is obvious. Truth requires no defense.
And truth doesn't require our agreement, where a lie does.
Right.
A lie needs you to agree, but truth lives in its own reality, and we are hopefully able to touch it or see it, but it is not something that I think people understand.
Yeah, well, this is why I love the maxims, because they're principles of truth. A
Mm-hmm.
maxim is a principle of truth. It's always consonant with logic and reason. And it has to be, because judges are supposed to know their maxims and base a lot of their decisions off of those maxims. And so you hear a maxim and you're like, God, that makes perfect sense. Like that. That's why. That's because truth is supposed to make perfect sense.
It's so interesting. I wasn't until I was a junior in college, did I ever hear the term trivium, which is amazing.
I had a conversation with a woman who was a professor at Yale, and she didn't even know what the trivium was. She'd never heard of it.
And for those who need a primer, it is grammar, logic, and rhetoric. Is
Yes.
the trivium.
Yes,
That is
and then following that is the quadrivium. So it's the 7 liberal arts, and it's about liberating the mind. So you have cognitive freedom, and you can recognize a false argument. You can recognize falsity, and then you can think critically, and you can learn anything. You don't need anyone there like breathing down your neck, showing you, and then you have to pay them all this money. No, because that's the foundation, the grammar, the words you learn or hear or read. And then the logic, your ability to parse through, and are there any inconsistencies in this argument, or is this a false argument? And there's a whole set of logical fallacies for that.
Mm-hmm.
And oh my God, it's so empowering. And then rhetoric is this speech. It's your ability now to speak to it. So it would be knowledge, wisdom, and understanding.
Mm-hmm.
It's so amazing.
I love when you were talking about your Facebook page, and when, you know, this whole debacle happened, that you would go down and looking at the comments and you're like, ad hominem. You know, you could identify each logical fallacy. And one of the things that when I was listening to that interview, I wanted to respond to you and say, the art that has been lost in social media is the art of contemplation. So what happens is someone posts something and then there's a knee-jerk reaction. So we get into emotion. There's no logic whatsoever. It's just gut, visceral reaction, like you're a fucking idiot or you're the genius or whatever it is, but it's not based in any, there's no foundation there. So there's no place that you can draw from and say, okay, well, this is why this person is making this argument. And I was thinking back to my years and years ago when I was on Facebook, and I would get into the geoengineering, GMO conversations with people, and they'd be like, you're fucking crazy. What are you talking about spraying? That's not anything. That's fine. It's whatever. And I remember thinking, what's happening here is that I'm applying logic to something. I'm observing something, I'm researching that thing, and then I am sharing the information. So when this person's responding to me and saying, you're a fucking idiot, they've done none of that.
Correct.
So I can look at your post and then take a piece of that and quote that and say, this is what I have an issue with in what you have said. And you are 100% correct when you say that art has been lost. That the mesmerism of the Black Mirror is, I have to respond immediately. So it's this lack of attention span to sit down and be thoughtful about what someone said and then really have a true exchange.
Yeah, it's so sad because I just think the mind is a beautiful thing, and I think most people start out with a really good mind, you know, and then you vaccinate the hell out of them and feed them horrible food and put them in these disgusting places called schooling, where their mind is their critical, like, it's like they don't stand a chance,
Mhm.
but somehow some people are able to kind of push through that. What the trivium's done for me also is it slowed me way down. And my law mentor used to say, Shonagh, you're too fast. You're too quick. Like, you're smart, but you're too quick. Like, you got to slow your mind down, dear, and just think it through. So, and then with the trivium, you have to. With the grammar, you've got to, and then the logic piece of going through their argument. Where are the flaws? Is this an appeal to authority? Is this an appeal to emotion? Blah, blah, blah. And it takes some time, but again, this is, boy, I just wonder how long this internet thing is going to last. Like, it's such a double-edged sword, because on one hand, we can have these conversations and I'm on YouTube, which I think is disgusting, in terms of what it's done, shutting people down and whatnot.
Yeah.
But I'm on there listening to lectures on whatever, this philosopher and the trivia, whatever it is, right? And just trying to learn as much as I can while they'll still allow that stuff on there.
Exactly.
And
I wanted to talk to you. One of my favorite subjects is fairies, and you brought something to my attention that I had never heard before. But I have a very personal relationship with it, so I wanted to share my experience. About 2000, I was in Malibu, California, and I had been working with Carlos Castaneda for several years.
Wow.
And my partner at the time, we went to this hotel that was on the beach, and this is right after Carlos had died. And we had many, many, many psychedelic substances that we took with us on this journey. We had psilocybin, we had MDMA, and I think cannabis. And so we went to this hotel with the intention that we were going to try to cross this bridge to connect with Castaneda, and we were going to use the psychedelics to do that. So the first day we get there, I think and this is so ridiculous to look back on, I think we had like 60 hits of MDMA. I mean, it was a lot. It was a lot. So daytime, I start taking the MDMA. Where this hotel is literally right on the beach. And we were on the top floors, the third floor. And I dragged the mattress of the bed onto the balcony because that's where I was going to have my psychedelic experience. So as I'm laying on the beach or in this hotel on this balcony, I'm looking out as I start to take my journey and watching the water and meditating on the ocean and seeing swimmers out and seeing people that are surfing out on the surf. And I look straight down, and there's families playing on the beach. It was beautiful, absolutely brilliant. Sun glistening. And I see this little boy, probably 12 years old, and he's massively fat. I mean, I'm talking like hugely fat. Brown boy, black hair, very tanned body, and he had little red shorts on. But he's by himself. And I'm watching this all day. Like, I was there from the time we checked in to the hotel till well into the evening. And as the sun's setting, I'm watching this little boy. And he's playing with, he would walk up to any child that was by themselves, and he would sit down, and they would build sandcastles, and they would play, and then that family would say, okay, it's time to go. And then the little kid would get up and they would leave. And then the little boy would stay there by himself. And he's sitting in the sand, but with the waves kind of lapping up on him. And for hours, I watched this beautiful scene of this chubby child playing with kids. And at the end of the night, at the end of that day, when the sun went down, he disappeared. He vanished. I never saw one person that looked like he was with them come and approach him, or it's time to go, honey, like, let's go. Gone. And as I lay there, I realized he's a seal.
A selkie.
I've just seen something from the ocean come onto the land and play with these children that are alone and they have no one. And he's this bright, just beautiful spirit, and then disappeared at the end of the day. And I wrote this story, and again, it was like a channel. It just came so clearly. His name is Sammy the seal. And he goes and he plays on the beach. He comes out of the ocean and plays on the beach with children that don't have anyone to play with them. And then he goes back into the ocean, and this is his life. Like, this is his story. And when I heard this interview and you mentioned silkies and seal fairies, this rush came over me where I recognized that I had had this experience before I had words for it, before I knew what it was that I was seeing. And it was so beautiful because I wasn't contriving, like, let me see some fairy spirit. Like, I just went into this energy with this openness, with maybe a different intention. But what I saw, what I experienced was so much more magical than what I had initially gone there and intended. So it felt like the spirit wanted to be seen. And it goes there every day, but no one recognizes it. So these children play with this spirit, and the parents don't really look around and go, oh, where's your father or your mother? They just kind of wander away, and he's just there waiting for the next child. It was so beautiful. And I just want to thank you for talking about that energy, because it just calcified and made real what I had, the experience that I'd had.
Yeah. Well, look, at the end of the day, this is a far more magical place than most people will ever know. And we have this overlay, this commercial and corrupted overlay at every level. And yet, it's like the magic never went away, because I don't think it actually can.
Mm-hmm.
But our minds can be taken away. I mean, even just think of even like Puff the Magic Dragon. Oh my God, what a beautiful, sad song. But, children, many of them have that ability.
Mm-hmm.
It's because it's innate in us to see, to receive message, whatever, right? And then at some point they get, led in more deeply into the construct. And that is discouraged or forgotten, whatever it is. But it is this place where we are a living mystery, and we are within a living mystery. This whole place is a living mystery. And there's so much untapped. And so substances like psilocybin there's no guarantee, but they can open the door to a far greater awareness and even connection with some of that. And again, not for everyone. We never know. You never know what's going to happen in a mushroom journey. I always tell people, you have no idea what's going to happen here. So
yeah, I think the magic was that I wasn't looking for it. I had opened myself up to whatever was supposed to come in through me, around me. And what I recognized in that is exactly what you're saying, is that all I'd done is put the pause button on consensus reality for a moment.
Yes.
And so because I did that, I think we need to take a drug to have a psychedelic experience. But as you know, and we both know, that door is completely there. And once you've swung it open, it's always available to you. we think we need the pill or the mushroom to get there, but it's just a matter of stepping out of your way to allow that veil to be lifted, or whatever metaphor you want to use. But that's what it felt like. It was like, oh, I'm not the only person that is seeing this little boy, but I'm maybe the only person who recognizes that this is a spirit that is inhabiting this human body, but that is not this spirit's body. So it's a really amazing thing to just say, maybe if I set my phone down, I don't take it out with me all over, I go to the forest, I sit and just be, not even meditate, just be in that space. If I pay attention, I'm going to see the magic because it is there all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. You just have to look. It reminds me of that old adage, for those with eyes to see and ears to hear.
Mm-hmm.
And as well, I think that we are magi's. Most people, again, don't know it, but I think if even imagination, you can be a nation unto yourself. So imagination is magi nation. Like, we are the nation of the magi.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a lot of powers, again, many untapped, but even the power of speech, the power of imagination, of visualization. And so if someone says, oh, that's nonsense, well, that's a declaration, and so it shall be. Then it will be nonsense for that person.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's not real, or that's just your, then okay, you've set the stage, and fine. Whereas someone else says, even just to think, well, no, I do think that's possible. Now the doors open a crack.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's there. It's like a hand, an invisible hand beckoning. And certainly psychedelics are an assist. They're a big, big assist. But ultimately it's altered states of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And there are people who can alter their consciousness through breathing, of course, specific breathing techniques, or through the power of the imagination, which is it gets shut down in grade school children.
Yes.
So, as you well know, Waldorf people, Steiner said those first 7 years, the auric field is still developing. You don't need to be teaching children all this stuff and memorization. They'll get there. Don't you worry. They need to be engaging the natural world. So, yeah.
No, please go ahead. Finish your thought.
No. I want to hear it, Chris.
Okay. I was just going to say, we are kind of drawing towards 2 hours. Okay. Maybe if you could, you mentioned earlier that you do retreats.
Yes.
Maybe if you could tell the people listening or watching what that entails. What would somebody come to you for you to help with or make room for, or
Sure.
I could go into that for a little bit.
Yes. Well, people come for a variety of reasons, right? And I've been a last resort for a few people. So they'll often come because they're stuck or just something's not working in their life. I get an awful lot of people with trauma in their background, too many. It's just amazing what people live through. And other people who really just want to deepen spiritually, or they're seeking a deeper experience. And so I did not come up with this. I didn't set out to do this at all. I had a client I was working with in the Midwest who just said, look, is there any way I could come out there? And I've been working with her. So, I could come out there and maybe stay with you and, just soak up your knowledge and have an experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, I got to figure out, let me think about this. And then my friend with the place up in the rainforest in Washington State said, you could use my house. I'll go stay with a friend. And so I picked this person up at the airport, drove 3 hours up the coast, and it was amazing. And then the following week, I had a client in person for counseling. And I just mentioned to her what I did. Like, yeah. And she said, you do that? Mm-hmm. And she pulled out her checkbook all those years ago and said, what do you charge for this? And I was like, I don't know. So she ended up coming up. And then my law mentor said, hey, I told my friends in New Jersey about what you did, this couple. He said, they want to know if they can fly out and work with you. And I was like, what is going what's going on here? So it's amazing how it's like life sometimes will just choose for you.
Mhm.
And so then I wrote up a very discreet sort of description on my website,
Mhm.
and then someone else came, and then just word of mouth just from those few people. And I mean, I've just been booked ever since. I mean, it's slowed down these last couple of years, and I can feel like, just things are shifting as they should.
Mhm.
But so that person arrives, like I said, on a Sunday afternoon usually, and then we work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And Monday and Wednesday is an opportunity to go very deep. And I work with the I Ching, which I love. It's like having an ancient sage. I work with cards. I see all of that as bridges, but not for divination, but for culling the psyche.
Mm.
And so I have a whole way that I use cards when my client first comes on, Sunday, once they get settled, and we'll ask this question, and they turn over 3 different cards from 3 different decks, but the same question.
Mhm.
And the first one is a tarot card. And the tarot is just amazing. And again, I'm not an expert, but I've been working with it for years, and I use it every day. And my God, it's just it just opens the door, and we get right into the depth. And I just have the ability, like I can key in, I'm very psychic, and I can just key into some of the major players in that person's life, and what's going on. I can read the deep psyche to a degree. And so that helps as well. And we do what I call delving. We're delving deeply into the heart of the matter for this person, and, the contributing factors and whatnot. And it's just amazing because it's like, where else can you go where it's all about you,
Mhm.
for that amount of time? And I've worked with a lot of psychotherapists,
Mm.
'cause they need some downtime. They need some me time. My God, they're give, right?
Mhm.
Every single one is like, I don't know how you do this, Shonagh, and I would not want to do this if someone in my home for all this time. But I have a lot of energy, and I'm really a good listener and very focused, and I just love being witness to another's humanity. And so at this point, I've worked with well over 300 people. I get a lot of people who come, repeat annually. Almost everyone this year's come for it's, whatever their third or fourth retreat, which is wonderful. So I form relationships with these people. I've worked with men and women from 18 to 84 from all walks of life, all
Mhm.
different races. I've worked with actually a number of African American people, which is awesome. And they're more, at least ones who've become way more conservative than I would have expected too. So just, it's just wonderful because we're not in a clinical setting. We're not in a formal retreat setting. And so after a day or so, they're just see people really just sort of relax,
Sure.
and they're feeling very comfortable. And so, yeah. And then they leave Friday morning, and then there's always follow up. And then I also do online counseling sessions. I do a number of those, and with retreat clients or just regular clients. But it's psycho-spiritual work. So it's psychotherapeutic woven with the spiritual, the shamanic. I don't know. I mean, I'm good at it. Like I've never done like institutional training for that.
Mhm.
And I've had different clients say, "Good, don't." Like, don't. You're good. So,
It's interesting because that was the field I was going into, was psychotherapy, and then sex therapy was the intention. But I've taken a sharp left, and I've gone into a completely different direction now, because that's where the energy was pushing me.
mhm.
I applied. We live in Lawrence, Kansas, and I went to the University of Kansas, which is very close to where we live. And then I applied for the master's program to get into a master's of psychology and counseling psychology or clinical psych, and I didn't get in. And it was at one point, it was fairly devastating because I was like, this is what I thought I was going to do. This is my training. This is my passion, is working with people one-on-one. But I recognized when the road was moving and that my journey was moving, or my path was moving, that I needed to follow where that flow was.
Mm.
So I did love that part when you were discussing working with psychotherapists, because I think that there is a symbiotic relationship with what you're doing and psychotherapy, and who heals the healer. I think that's the main thing, is that the healers need to be healed.
Oh yeah, my God, because they're give. It's a lot. I mean, for me also give, and so I need my downtime and my me time as well, of course. And also, I have psychotherapists who will send, a client, one of their clients to me every so often. And then what's good is, with the client's permission, I can also meet with the therapist and say, okay, so this is what we covered, and this is, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's wonderful. I mean, I love that opportunity when I get it.
How do you clean yourself? How do you clean your energy?
Well, so I love to work out, and I'm a walker, and I live by the base of the Shenandoah Mountains.
Mm.
So my morning walk is sacred to me. Now, that said, my girls got me into Orange Theory Fitness a few months back, so I've been going there, but I actually just canceled my membership, so I've got another month or so. I hate the music. It's too loud. And anyway, whatever. But I do think it's really, really, really important to spend time outside in nature alone, but or whatever, with your lover or whoever as well, of course. So I do that. I also take really good care of my body anyway, and I love just my alone me time. So really, for me, I've got a stack of books on my table. I read my books, curl up. I work with talismans, which is a whole other conversation, but I have practices with those talismans as well that I do. And so, yeah, and ultimately, just staying close to God. I mean, I call that God, but for instance, like at night when I get into bed, and in the morning, the last thing I say and the first thing I say is thank you. But I call it good father, good mother, good she. So I speak with the she. So it's like this constant communication. And so, I don't know, for me, it's very grounding. It's very simple. And maybe I'll get a massage here and there, but I just, that time for me is that time for me, where I know it's joy for me. And that connecting to the beauty. Like, I live in a beautiful place. Oh my God, it's so beautiful. One of my clients invited me to live on her alpaca farm. And,
Ooh, nice.
Yeah, it's so pretty. And I love Virginia. It's my favorite state I've ever lived in. So I'm in a state of gratitude. I don't take anything for granted, and especially now with so many people suffering and so much uncertainty. So anyway, yeah. And I'm very grateful that I get to do what I do. So grateful. I could never work in a corporation. I couldn't even imagine.
No.
It's so unnatural.
Well, my sister Shonagh, I am so blessed to know you, and I just feel so grateful for you. And please, please, please continue to do everything that you are doing, because you are doing it correctly. And I thank I thank the father and the mother that have brought you here from this earth and the ones beyond. And this has just been such a true pleasure and honor to be with you.
Yes. And before you go, tell the listeners and viewers where they can find you and your work.
Yes, my website is shonaghhome.com. And so it's all there. I have a little podcast also called The Mushroom's Apprentice, and
cool.
I teach courses every now and then, and they can sign up for a session or write to me for more information about the retreats and whatnot. And so it's all there. And you guys, I want to have just a regular conversation with you guys later, because
we need to.
Wonderful. Yeah.
For sure. Absolutely. We'd love that.
I'm trying to figure out when I can come to Virginia to be with you. So that we can have a session, because I'm really, the healer needs to be healed.
Yes,
I'm really
she could use it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You said all the right words. You said something in that other interview that you said I'm listening to what someone is saying, but I'm listening between the words, like
beneath and between the words.
Yes,
Yeah.
and you get it. Like, so you say things that are responding to my energy. So when you say stuck, I'm like, I'm stuck. Like, so it's like you are naturally, you're just an alchemist. Like, you get it. You know what's going on.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm so thrilled to know you guys. Oh my goodness.
Likewise.
It's amazing.
Well, this will be the first of more conversations for sure.
Definitely.
Yes.
Definitely. Thank you.
Yes, and if you would, because of this platform, it records from your computer and our computer and loads it up to a server where I will download it later. But maybe before you sign out of your browser, make sure that everything is uploaded. Should just take a few minutes.
Sure. So, okay.
From this end, it says it's 99% uploaded, so I would imagine it wouldn't take very long at all.
Okay, so I should stay here until it's fully
uploaded. You don't have to stay in front of your computer. Just leave your browser window open.
Sure.
If you don't mind.
Of course. Oh yeah. My pleasure. I see it right now. Okay.
Okay, cool.
Awesome.
Great.
Fantastic. Shonagh, thank you.
Shonagh. Have a wonderful rest of your Saturday.
Do I need to even ask you what you thought of that conversation?
Jeez Louise. I felt like I just woke up from a amnesiac episode. Like I had been asleep for 56 years, and when I woke up, someone was like, "This is your sister," and I was like, "There's my sister." Yeah, she's fucking phenomenal. She's amazing. I'm so into her and her realm and world, and just God, I mean, people, just look at the cover of this book. How freaking beautiful this book is. It's so cool. She's just a cool chick.
Yeah, I read, I haven't finished reading that book, but I've been going through that book and finding things that I wanted to ask more about. And there's one aspect of a person, you see their words that they've written, the words that they choose and what they're choosing to communicate and how they're choosing to communicate it. But it's another thing altogether when you kind of see them in action. You see them move, you see what they look like, you see how they animate themselves, the glint in their eye. And after, like, I didn't see her until I started watching an interview, I think a couple of days ago. And I was like, oh, okay, this all makes sense now. Like, in the context of this individual that I'm seeing in front of me, like, I totally get it. I totally get what she's saying and what she's trying to communicate. And I'm down for it. Like, she just, like you said, she seems like she is the real deal. She's very present. Deal. Yeah. She's embodying what she's talking about.
Totally.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you go back to these snake oil salesmen like John Edward, and there's another guy who was really famous there with a big fat mustache for a while. These people who claim that they're psychics and can speak to the dead or whatever. And then it comes out that when you order tickets to their show, that they actually have people who go to your house to see what your house looks like, and they basically stalk you. And so they'll pick people out in the audience and say, "You live in a yellow house." And everyone's like, "Oh my God, they're psychic." But it's all a sham. Mm-hmm. And so to just hear her work is one thing, but then when she reads a poem that she has channeled, what was so powerful about that is that I heard the voice of the person she was channeling, the energy she was channeling. So her voice was just slightly different. It's still her, but it's like she's speaking someone else's words. And to hear that is mind-blowing. It was really, really amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Great stuff. And I could imagine how therapeutic it would be to go into her house, have her sort of hold your hand and take care of you for a week, and you get to just get all of this stuff out of you and experience things in the context of somebody that's, very astute, very focused and receptive to whatever it is that you need to get out. And yeah, I don't know. It seems like a very effective mode of therapy. I see why it's not popular because, I mean, what hospital or psychiatric institution is going to do something like that? And how would they do it in a totally clinical and soulless fashion? But, and I like that she's not accredited. She has no license. She hasn't formally learned to do what she does, but yet the proof is in the pudding, you know, like the proof is in the work.
Yeah. I see the things that the challenges that I have, being generational, mesmerisms or generational, I don't want to say like curses, but it definitely feels like that sometimes.
Sure.
And I think that someone like Shonagh, I would feel confident in putting myself in an environment where I could be open enough to clear these things. Because I just think that there are specific places in your life that put speed bumps in your life, and the more you try to clear those away with drugs, alcohol, shopping, whatever behavior, the more calcified and concretized those things become. They don't become less, they become stronger. So having someone that maybe has an objective, energetic perspective can potentially help you unlock that stuff. I think that that's the kind of healing that really needs to be done, because you are healing yourself, but you're doing it within the confines of someone else's sacred space that they have created that is designed for that.
Yeah. And going to some rented office in some office building with fluorescent lights, 45 minutes once a week. I mean, I don't know, that you barely get a chance to get the ball rolling, and then you have to stop your session, come back next week. You're not on the same frequency or wavelength, and try and take it up again.
Yeah.
But having, several days in a row, I could see that as being a great opportunity to really dig deep and get dirty.
And it's also like, it's like Burning Man. Like when Burning Man first started, there was this very much DIY, intentional community attitude about, about Burning Man that was very powerful. And I think there was something very, very important about that movement when it first started. What it is now turned into is that you can pay people to set up your camp for you at Burning Man. They will bring you your drugs. They will make sure you have toilet paper. They will make sure you have lighting and a full bar and all of the trappings of Burning Man without having to do any of the work. And I think you could say the same thing about people who go into therapy sessions, is that the idea is really for you to start doing your own work.
For sure.
But that's not going to work if you're going for a 55-minute session and really all you're doing is someone else has set up your camp for you and someone else has brought you your drugs, and you just get to dip in and tell your story or tell your lies and then fuck off. Well, have you really learned anything in that session? So if you've gone to Burning Man, have you really learned anything? If someone set up your camp for you and you've not had to do anything at all and you've helicoptered in, and so I think there's something to be said about doing the work yourself and being put in an environment that supports that work. So I think that should be the intention of psychotherapy or any type of formalized therapy. But I think the intention is not that. I think that's been lost, and it has become this money-making machine.
Aided by the pharmaceutical industry that is supposed to take care of whatever work, measly work, meager work that the psychiatrist can't do. Like, we're going to throw this combination of antipsychotic and antidepressive medications, and that doesn't quite work. We'll keep tweaking it until we arrive at the lesser of the 70 evils, and that's just, I don't know, taking a pill to work through your shit is not work. it's not a proper way of achieving a state of mind, and there's something very synthetic about it.
Yeah, I think that every person that we have spoken to across the board, the one common thread that each one of them have brought to the conversation has been nature and connecting with nature and being part of nature and the significance of nature. And if we are in this psychic battle or this spiritual battle where it is the synthetic versus the organic, I think that is something that is definitely being reinforced in that negative space. Is like, we need synthetic fabric, synthetic food, synthetic love, synthetic all of it. But there are people who are waking up to natural law and the power of the earth and connecting to the earth and the necessity of that. So I don't know where the scales are and if they're balanced or not, but I think that there is definitely an awareness that continues to grow, that what we are doing is not working in this slog towards AI and bug eating.
That's not where I'm walking towards. But
no.
And there's along with the synthetic is the, that in and of itself not only states that it's a trying to intimidate, imitate. I don't know why I couldn't think of that word. Imitate something that is natural. It's also controllable. It's external. Mm-hmm. So if you need a pill to solve your problems, or you think that you do, you've got to get that from somebody else. And to get it from somebody else, you've got to ask permission. In order to get permission, they have to make you jump through these hoops and prove that you need this medicine, which isn't going to actually help you at all, but maybe just barely serve the function of a Band-Aid. It's just completely broken. And I think what Shonagh is doing is much more long-lasting and inspires the work to come from within, as opposed to becoming dependent on something that's outside of you.
Yeah, I just think that we have, in this cage that we're in of EMF, I think that well, I mean, this is kind of a side note to what I was about to say. The thing that is amazing about the brain is how complex it is, and how there are bad actors, nefarious characters that are trying to do things to control people's brains. So mesmerism, mind control, food, environment, all of these things that are being fucked with. The intention is that it is going to make your brain basically a prison, like try to contain something that is vast by using all of these devices. Mm-hmm. What's amazing about studying the brain is that there's still areas that have not been mapped of the brain. So if the scientists think, okay, I'm going to do this and it's going to have this effect, what they don't recognize is that what other parts of the brain are going to light up or be affected or influenced when you try to mitigate or stop some brain function. And I think that that's what's happening with the EMFs, is that the intention is like, okay, we are containing this energy, and we are keeping people in this cage with these frequencies. But what they're not recognizing is that the earth has this ability to maybe circumnavigate those waves, that EMF. So what I am positing is that all of this energy, this ancient energy, is being stirred up within the soil, within the ground, and that all of this stuff is bubbling up to the surface as a response to this frequency that is being shot at the earth or within the earth constantly. So I think that there's going to be unintended consequences in the EMF realm.
For sure.
So it's kind of like the COVID thing. They lock everybody up and then they don't realize, oh, wow, that's going to wake people up because they're going to have plenty of time to do research. I think it's the same thing. There's going to be some unintended consequence from the EMF bathing that we are in. So it's part of that balance that just because all of this negative stuff is happening doesn't mean that positive stuff is not bubbling up or some counterbalance is not being awakened or engaged.
Of course. By all of this ugliness happening, it's revealing itself. So another reason why censorship shouldn't exist, we should be able to see the ugliness in people along with the beauty. So if we see the ugliness, then we know what to stay away from or to steer around or not comply with or not consent to. So more power to this whole line and rigmarole of bullshit that we've been dealing with for the last 3 years. I think it's done a lot of waking up. And I think there's more waking up to do because there's still a lot of people that are asleep. Not that everybody is going to become awake, whatever awake is. I use that term loosely. But at the very least, I think more awareness of what is going on and how the machinations of this whole machine works and what the motivations for that machine are. And then maybe people will be able to provide more of a informed consent about whether or not they want to participate in that game or not. And I think more people will probably choose not to participate. I think that's the direction that we're heading in.
Yeah, I don't think that anything is decided or determined yet.
Not at all.
And what is interesting is that the same thing that happened around the 2020 election, again, we are in this same energy spectrum, which is the fear has been ramped up to its highest intensity so that people feel like no matter what happens in this election, we're fucked. So if your person gets chosen, we're fucked because the other side is going to not agree with that. If the other person is chosen, then this side is going. So it's like it's a foregone conclusion that things are fucked up. But I think that there's this other energy that is going to continue to make itself apparent. So the civil wars that they keep talking about that are going to happen in this country, I think that there will be some type of an intervention energetically, spiritually, that is going to prevent that from happening.
That's where I'm placing my vote.
Me too.
Okay, my dear. My body is calling me to go to a little tiny room where there's a strange little chair with a hole in it. And I'm just going to see what happens. So I feel a calling, though.
Okay.
Thank you all so very much for listening. I can't help but think that you got something positive from Shonagh. I mean, come on, people. We encourage you to check out her and her work. I am reminded again that she has a podcast, which I definitely am going to check out myself.
The Mushroom Apprentice.
Yeah. So thank you for listening. Support her. If you want to support us, that's fine too. I can't think of anything else to say or any direction.
That's all we got.
If you want to get a hold of us, it can be at themeltpodcast@protonmail.com.
Or hunter-muse@protonmail.com.
Don't forget to smash that subscribe, but not too hard, because it's got feelings too.
Yeah.
On that note, farewell.